Hi everyone, we welcome you all to this Week Tech Tuesday webinar on scanning and data discovery best practices in cloud data governance and catalog. Today's speaker is Avanish Srivastava, who's a principal solution architect. Before we start the session, let's go through some of the housekeeping tips. The webinar is for 1 hour that includes 15 minutes Q&A. You can post your queries in Q&A box which will be answered at the end of the presentation. All participants will be muted during the presentation. The session will be recorded and it will be available on our Infra Support YouTube channel and Success Portal where you'll be able to download the slide deck. Please feel free to submit your suggestion or feedback for this session in the post-webinar survey. The Success Portal is a micro-learning platform that offers free, unlimited learning to all the registered users. This feature-rich platform helps you learn and adopt to Informatica products better. The following are few important links that you can go over later. This will help you in your product adoption journey with Informatica. Over to you, Avanish. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi everyone, this is Avnish Srivastav, and let's quickly run to the agenda we have for the webinar today. And as you can see here, we have got a few concepts to cover about the metadata scanning process in cloud data governance and catalog. We'll go through a quick process flow as well on a step-by-step execution plan for scanning metadata into the catalog. We would get into data classifications as well because this is one of the key concepts about data discovery. And this will be followed by a demonstration of these very features in the tool. And then we will have a Q&A session towards the end. But please feel free to type your questions during the session as well, and we'll try our best to respond to all of those as we can. So with this, let's get to the first topic we have today. The introduction to Informatica's intelligent data management cloud and cloud data governance. So basically, as you can see here, the intelligent data management cloud is actually a big umbrella sort of thing under which different data management capabilities or services are provisioned. And the list here is pretty large and mostly covers all the operations you would need to be done on data, like data integration, exposing data through APIs, consuming APIs, doing data quality checks, master data management, data marketplace, and data governance and catalog as well. One of the key things about having everything under the same roof is that all these services can talk very seamlessly to each other. The administration becomes easy. You don't have to really onboard users every time for new services because all of this could be done through the same administrator service. So there are many upsides of having everything under the same data management cloud. And as discussed already, today's session is more focused on data governance and catalog and the metadata scanning part of it. So let's get to the relevant section today. And with that, let's jump to the next slide, which is just highlighting the key services in Informatica's data management cloud, which creates the experience of cloud data governance and catalog. So this screenshot is just a screen grab of your default login page for cloud data, Informatica Data Management Cloud. You would see all these different services, and the key services which constitute cloud data governance and catalog, or which are needed to be aware of, are listed here on the left side. Administrator is a common service applicable to pretty much all services we have. This is where you would create the connections to to a data source, onboard your users, define your roles. So that applies to data governance all the more. Metadata Command Center is another very key service, which is where we would, as the name suggests, it is the command center. That means we would set up all our scanning parts, all custom attributes, set up workflows, all these things under this service. It is not where you would be searching for metadata. This is not the catalog. It is the place where you set up the connections and resources for the catalog data sources and data classifications and many other things too. Data governance and catalog, the third one in the list here, is basically the actual UI, which will be accessed by users who are willing to search for metadata. Who are your data governance users? So This is where all of your technical metadata, which is scanned from data sources, will reside, and also the business metadata, or as we call it in cloud data governance world, governance assets that would also reside in the data governance and catalog. So both business metadata as well as technical metadata is here in the data governance and catalog, and it is relate. You can relate them together to provide better context, business to technical transition for somebody trying to understand data. So that's where data governance and catalog comes in picture. You would expect more and more people to come into this place than to metadata command center. Cloud data quality and profiling is actually a very key component of data governance and catalog, because profiling, of course, happens on when we scan metadata, we do profile to get the statistical signatures of the data and value frequencies if we choose to provide better context about the technical metadata. And we would also we can also show the data quality rules on our critical data elements or glossary terms through linking the data governance with cloud data quality as well. And then last but not the least, data marketplace, which is a different service, but then it is often used in conjunction with cloud data governance, that once you have governed or mastered your data sets, and you want to, create this marketplace for data where people can come in and search for the data they need through specific categories, then they would go to data marketplace. We would not be talking about it pretty much today. There have been some webinars on this topic, but I just wanted to highlight this because it comes up often with data governance and catalog. Now with this, let's look at the uh, execution part of metadata. So as mentioned already, today's session is more about, focusing on the metadata extraction and ingestion into the cloud data catalog. Now this slide here shows the execution flow, the actual things which happen, uh, uh, when you start in a metadata ingestion job or extraction job. So, and this slide, as the name suggests up top, this is secure agent based execution. So we have two options. You can use secure agent based execution and also serverless. They have their pros and cons, and secure agent based execution is more common and popular so far. So as you can see here on the far left side here, we have our uh, data sources on customer side. So this vertical line actually, differentiates what's on customer's cloud or on-prem system and what is on Informatica Data Management Cloud. So the far left, we have our metadata sources. This could be a cloud source like Google BigQuery or S3 or Redshift, or it could be an on-premise data source like Oracle SQL Server or any database or application which is supported. So the first step is metadata extraction, which means and it happens on the secure agent. The secure agent is that lightweight server which you have to install behind your firewalls, and this is the uh, machine which will connect with your data sources. So you don't have to open connectivity to your data sources to the Informatica cloud per se. It would all be accessed within your firewall. Secure agent would make that connection. You would have to define that connection. And then metadata extraction would be the first step. And data profiling would be the second step if you select the data profiling option. And the profiling job is more data intensive. So it actually goes and looks in the data within the tables and files. Metadata extraction, on the other hand, is more about just bringing the metadata like tables, files, reports, attributes, and schemas database based on the source system. But profiling is where we look into the data. You can choose the sample of data which you will be profiling on, but it brings a lot of additional context to the data, like not just the column name, but the type of data within that column, the pattern, the value frequency, the suggested data types. These things are all gathered through the profiling. And once metadata extraction and profiling completes, then starts the ingestion part of the uh, scanning process, and this happens outside of your customer's premise. So basically, all of the metadata is extracted on secure agent, and then Informatica Serverless cluster spawns off some jobs for ingestion, which means bring the metadata into our catalog. Discovery is the next step where we do all that data discovery, which you have enabled for the metadata extraction. I will talk more about the discovery options in the demo, but the discovery more commonly like data classification discovery, like for detecting sensitive data or or even associating technical metadata to glossary terms. So all these things will happen in the discovery phase. And once these two steps are completed, the metadata extracted with the profile results and the discovery results are ingested into the cloud data governance repositories, which is accessible to the users of Cloud Data Catalog. Now, with serverless execution of metadata extraction, uh, as you can see here, a lot more things are happening on Informatica Data Management Cloud side. Uh, and of course, the data source, be it a cloud source or on-premise data source, is residing on customer side. And the metadata extraction is happening on Informatica Serverless cluster, followed by the same ingestion, discovery process, and in the end, going all of the ingesting all the information to Cloud Data Governance Repository, the catalog. The thing which is missing here is profiling, which is not yet supported on serverless mode. Um, and it is on the roadmap, so we would hear through the release announcement at some point. But one of the uh, uh, downside of this approach is that, of course, it is if you have on-prem data sources or even with your cloud data sources, you don't want to open connection to Informatica serverless clusters directly, then it may not make much sense and for you, and that's why secure agent mode based execution is more popular. And also the profiling is not here in this approach today. So with this, let's jump to our next slide, which is a deep dive into the metadata scan process. So we looked at the overall flow of activities which happens behind the scene when you run a metadata extraction job, but how to set up that metadata scan process, what are the do's and don'ts and what are the best practices, that is something I have tried to capture on this slide. So the first part is the pre-work outside the Informatica Data Management Cloud. So at this point, we are not looking in the tool itself, but we are doing some initial work prior to scanning the metadata. And these are, the first thing is to identifying and understand the metadata sources which needs to be scanned. So if you are a new Cloud Data Catalog customer, you would know what data you want to ingest into the catalog and what uh, what exact thing within that data. Like, are you interested in only metadata profiling results as well? Do you also want to scan stored procedures or lineage? So all those things needs to be understood first. And then the next thing, which is very important, is to review the product documentation for metadata sources. So it is all available online as well. And based on the metadata source you have, you would look at the product documentation to understand what are the prerequisites, like what kind of user you need, what permissions you need, what are the expected results, like once the scan completes, what components of metadata would you see and what you will not see as well. So it's important to look at the documentation for that specific scanner. And then, of course, looking at the support statements and recommendations, which is part of the documentation. So yeah, go through the documentation thoroughly, especially if you're setting up a JDBC based scanner. So we do have a JDBC scanner, which can be applied to a bunch of databases or supported sources where we have a JDBC driver, but we have some statements, support statements, like we cannot certify all JDBC based sources. Some of them are certified, but there are many others which would work, but they are not supported or certified by our QA team. But we would encourage you to go and set it up and just go through the process. But read the statements, support statements, and documentation prior to that. And then once you have the uh, gone through all of these steps, uh, then you would have to get a user created, right? So in many cases, if you are using Informatica Data Management Cloud for data integration purpose or something else, you may already have a connection entity created in Informatica side, which you may want to reuse. But if not existing already, then you would need to get a new user created by the system admin of that source system and provide them all the privileges or permissions you would need and everything. Well, once all this is completed, then you would have the pre-work done, and then comes the scanning steps within Informatica Data Management Cloud. And most of these activities will happen in Metadata Command Center, but let's look at the whole flow of activities here. The first box here says it says if connection entries to be reused from existing IDMC process. As I mentioned, right, if you have a data integration job where you're connecting to Google BigQuery or Oracle or something of that sort, you can reuse that connection too. But then we have often seen that and that you might require some more privileges, like on the certain specific metadata views or something, which may not be there for your data integration user. And just for better management perspective also, it's good to create a new connection so that the new connection doesn't have to have write, because data integration may often require write, but for data extraction or ingestion into catalog, you won't need write privileges generally. So getting a new user with the right privileges for metadata extraction is recommended. And if you do not have it, then of course, create a new connection entry for metadata process in the administrator service of IDMC. And if you want to reuse the existing connection, then of course you can just go ahead and use that. And after this step is done, you are into the metadata command center, which is the main service which does all these activities for metadata extraction. So the first thing you would need to do is to register a resource, like give the resource a name, a meaningful name, like maybe customer data platform or something of that sort. And then you would have to provide the connection object, like which is the connection entry from administrative service which you want to use. And once you do that, you will select the runtime environment for metadata extraction. And then you get to the next step, which is the resource configuration here. So in the resource configuration, a lot of things happen. That is the crux of the overall, metadata resource setup process. And there are 5 different, activities you'll see there. The first one is metadata extraction. So you would choose certain, like options based on your metadata source often. Uh, like what metadata you need, and do you want to, like, for example, if I'm scanning SQL Server or Oracle, then do I want to process the programmable objects like stored procedures or functions like that? So that's step one. Step two is data profiling. So for data profiling, you would need to, first of all, you need to select, do you want to do data profiling or not? If you don't want to do profiling, you just have to skip it. But if you do, then you will select the right sample size of the data you want to run through. It is not recommended to go through all the data, because that there could be a lot of rows in the tables, and when the resource executes, it would create a job for all those tables and go through all the columns. So it is better to go with a sample of data so that you can get some meaningful statistical signature about your data without harming the performance so much. Now the next step is data classification here, and that's one of the very important aspect of data discovery in Cloud Data Catalog. Data classification, I'll talk in a bit more detail, but yeah, you would have to select what data classifications you want to discover on this data to, like, do you want to discover specific sensitive data elements like PII data elements or something else you want. We also have something called relationship discovery. I've got 2 stars next to it because relationship discovery may not be applicable to all the cases, but it can discover relationship based on a model which is already present in your Cloud Data Catalog environment. and it can recommend you like if there are two tables, similar data based on data and metadata, if something is joinable with something else. So, and glossary association is the last step. So glossary association is also very important, I would say, if you have got your glossaries created, like the business terms or metrics, then you can select the glossary association. And what it does is basically it can find what technical metadata, column names or something can be attached to a specific business term, for example. And it has some inbuilt algorithms where, if a short form of a name uh, like account number could be a business term, but ACCT NBR could be a name of a column in a table. So if we choose the glossary association to be enabled, then it would try to link this column with that glossary term in the catalog, and that would create a good experience when somebody searches for that business term. He would see that, okay, these are the columns, technical columns in this table, file, or data lake, which are having this data. So glossary association is also a critical piece. And once we are done with all of that, then we move to the next step, which is very important, which is defining the filters for the metadata extraction. So filter definition is very important because we have often seen that people just run a job without specifying any filter. And for example, if it is a big database or something where you have too many, like thousands and thousands of tables and everything, well, it can create a lot of clutter in the catalog. Of course, it'll not be good for performance perspective and also for cost perspective, because all this execution and everything eventually counts towards the IPU, the informatic app processing unit, which is, which helps us to charge the usage of the platform. So it is better to start with a filter for metadata extraction. You can increase the filter scope, but always start with a filter, maybe a more uh, uh, conservative approach, and then uh, you can, of course, expand the horizon accordingly. And after the filters are defined, and the filters, I mean, yeah, when you look at the filters in the demo, you'll see we have what kind of options we have. We could do include, exclude, all sort of things. Examples are like you don't want to scan tables which have backup or something in their name, or temp in their name, or a specific schema or user schemas. So those sort of things you would be able to define. Now, defining stakeholder association is also an option. So at the time of scanning itself, you can define who would be the stakeholders on this resource. And after we are done with this, we can choose a scheduled frequency for this execution. And then the last step would be to save and run this resource. And you can monitor the execution and resolve any issues as per the log. So the monitor UI would show you a specific entry for each activity, like for metadata extraction, for profiling job, for data discovery, like data classification. So you would see all those individual line items in the monitoring view, and you can see what happens where, what went wrong somewhere. So the log is also very intuitive. It's like a CSV file where you can see individual threads and what's happening, what went wrong. So we definitely encourage that once you submit the job, look at the logs in the monitor and ensure that the things are running as expected. Once the run is complete, you can see a quick, overview of statistical outcome of your execution, like how many tables got created, how many data classification got associated, how many tables got profiled, how many columns got ingested, things like that. And finally, to validate the results of your scanning process, we recommend that you go to the data catalog UI as well. So that now we are asking you to come out of the metadata command center and open the data catalog UI and just look at the resource which is just completed to see, that, okay, all table, columns, procedures, or depending on whatever the resource is, what all components are there. And this applies for every scan that once the scan is completed, there will always be some curation and some enrichment needed. No matter how much discovery we do, how much data domain discovery we do, or glossary association, there can be some false positives or false negatives. So we encourage the data stewards to review the results, curate them, and enrich them going forward. So that is a high level process flow for the metadata scanning in the cloud data governance and catalog. Now let's look at another key aspect of metadata extraction process, which is data classification. I did call it out in the overall process in the previous slide. The data classification basically is a means to organize and categorize your metadata into categories based on their functional meanings, and they're generally rule based, and there are a lot of out of the box data classifications already created in our Informatica platform, and you can import that content just by a simple click in the cloud data governance in the metadata command center UI. And there are more and more data classifications are being developed, and all you have to do is just to select to import them, and they will be available for you to use. Having said that, you can also create your own data classifications based on rules, and the documentation does have details on how to create them. We will look at that in the demo too, but let's understand the type of data classifications we have. So one of the more common data classification is the data element classification. As the name suggests, it is on an attribute level within a table or a file, and it is generally rule based. So you can define rules and rule could be on the column name, it could be on the data within that column, it could be the comments on that column, it could also be on the parent name. So uh, you can also look for the table name if you're trying to detect a data element classification for a specific column. So this example, the screenshot here is for address line 1, where we are actually looking at the different column name for that, variations of names for this column. It could contain address, ADDR, no, ADDR line 1. And we are also looking in the values. So we are looking into the values, and we are actually looking for a specific occurrences within the values, like if it has avenue or street or boulevard, so or way or something like that, the common address namings. So based on this, a data element would be tagged on a column. If a specific column within a table or a file uh, verifies all these tests, then the element will be discovered on that. Now that is data element classification. We have something called data entity classification as well. This is a combination of data element classification. It gets, and some examples are like person data, address data, or purchase order data. And the way it works is that you would have to create a data entity classification. You would have to choose what data element classification would constitute that data element, and then you would choose that, okay, does all of these need to be found for this, or any two, three, or few of these needs to be found. So like in this example, I created a data entity classification called address data, and I have chosen the address line 1, city, zip, county, and street. And in the include section, I have said not all, but any and any three. So any three of these five, if they are detected, then that entity data classification would be tagged uh, on the table or file. So these references are actually having the links to some of the useful information on Informatica portal, like links to some documentation places where you can find the supported metadata sources, the requirements, prereqs, how to work with assets in catalog, some webinars like a case study done recently for healthcare user using cloud data governance, how to scan SSIS, SSRS, and MS SQL. One of the important one is predefined data classification in Cloud Data Governance Catalog, so that you can see what all classifications are out of the box available for our users, and the sizing guidelines as well. So I would recommend going through these links. And with this, we are at the end of the slides and we will jump into the demo section now. So thank you. So for this demo, we will go through the same process as we just walked through in one of the slides. So the first thing is that I have identified that, okay, I need to scan Google BigQuery as it is one of my key data source system. So I'll come to the documentation of the product. And here in the Google BigQuery section, I mean, you can see this is the link I have put in the reference section as well. So if you come to this documentation, you would see all the supported catalog resources. For this example, for this demo, I have picked up Google BigQuery, but there are plenty others too. So for Google BigQuery, the moment I open it, I would see that, okay, the Google, I mean, a one-liner about Google BigQuery, and more importantly, what do we extract from Google BigQuery scanner? So like project, dataset, tables, external tables, partition tables, views, materialized view. There are some specific notes to read. And then for the permissions, like the user which you need for a scanning purpose, what all permissions do you read? This may be more or less than what you would ideally need for a DI purpose. Like you need permissions to list table, to get, to create jobs. So this is how your user should be for the extraction purpose. Now for data profiling purpose, there are some additional clauses to understand that what can the profile do, what we cannot do. Like for this example, uh, we cannot profile views and materialized views. So just like that, I mean, the data type which are supported, the sampling type we support for profiling. So it's a good read. I mean, before we start scanning thing, it is always good to come here and look at the documentation. One of the very important thing is to know that what is the type of connection object you should choose. So you can see that, when you create the connection object in IDMC's Informatica Cloud's administrator service, you have to choose the right connection type. So for metadata scanning purpose, we use Google BigQuery V2. There may be cases where you may be using a different type of connection for your DI jobs, but for metadata scanning purpose, we specify which connection type you should be creating for, and you should choose exactly the same type of connection object. So with that said, I mean, yeah, we know that, okay, this is what the Google BigQuery scanner is like. This is what we extract. This is what we cannot do, like profiling views and all of that. And now, I guess, based on this information, we have got a user account created by Google BigQuery admin, which we would use for this demo purpose. So I will now jump to the product itself. And since I have got the connection object and everything created, so I'm just going to go ahead and start playing with the tool. So the moment you log into Informatica Cloud, you would see all these different services, as I mentioned already, and Metadata Command Center, Data Governance and Catalog, the two key component of cloud data governance. And apart from that, administrator services here too. So the first thing which we have to do is to create a connection object in the administrator tool, because that is the connection entry we will use to scan the metadata. So if I open this one, and I have already having it open, so I'm just gonna go to the administrator page, and here I have got a connection created for this scanner. So if I open this one, you can see that, okay, this is my connection details, like this is the account ID, storage path, and all those things, and it's a valid connection. Now this connection is what I will have to use. So now the connection object is created here, so I can go to the metadata command center now, and here I can go to the resource which I'm about to create and scan. So this is the metadata command center UI, by the way. I would have come here and right click and open the metadata command center like this, but I have it already open, so I'm just gonna go to this tab here. So this is metadata command center. We would see the highlights like how many resources we have, assets we have, how many users are there, how many data classifications are there, and some additional details like what are the recent jobs which have run, the asset trend and whatnot. Now for our demo, we have to focus on scanning a specific resource, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and open up a specific resource, the Google BigQuery one for this exercise. So let me open this one. So I'm just gonna go to the 79 sources we have so that I can open the resource in question here. Now we have quite a few resources here, and I have to go to since I have it already created, so I will not go to the creation part, but I just searched for GBQ named resources and I got these three. And for this demo purpose, I have created this resource, the GBQ customer order data. So if I open this resource up, this is already open. And now these are the different phases of the scanning, which I was talking about. So the first thing is to choose the connection object created in the administrator service. So I have chosen this specific connection object, Google BigQuery's connection object. Remember, we are not creating the connection in the metadata command center. We are using the one which we created in the administrator service. And here we will see all the details like runtime environment, project ID, and I could do a test connection as well here. Now, once I have, and I have given this name also for this resource. I do not have a description. Let me just type it in here. Uh, uh, TBQ scanner for demo purpose. It is always a good practice to add some description so that anybody who is looking up the resources in catalog, if there is a higher level purpose or messaging for that resource, they would see it in the description. Now, when we go to configuration, which is the most important part of the scanning, that's where these 5 different stages come. Remember the slide where we had talked about metadata extraction, data profiling, data classification, relationship discovery, and glossary association. Now, we don't have to run all of these. I mean, if you are not interested in data profiling, you could simply uncheck this one and you can see it disappears from here. If you're not interested in relationship discovery, you can uncheck this one. So, but for this demo purpose, I'll just keep all of these things checked so that I can show all these. So the first one is metadata extraction. And for Google BigQuery especially, we don't have much to select here. We would just say which is the runtime environment where the metadata extraction will happen. And you can see that we have a bunch of secure agents and we have one serverless option. So as you may recall, the serverless supports the metadata extraction. So I could do it on this one also, but I have selected one of the secure agent, which I have already installed somewhere. Now in configuration parameters, we do not see anything, but this based on the metadata resource, you will see some details here. Like for example, if I quickly switch to my Oracle resource, just to show the values you will see, and I come to the metadata extraction section, you will see that in metadata extraction we have options like process programmable objects. So do I want to process programmable objects like procedures and stuff or not? I can say yes or no, and there are some other things too. So this setting actually does have some things to select, but for this particular example, which is Google BigQuery, we don't have any selections to be made for metadata extraction apart from the runtime environment. Next is data profiling. So we would do data profiling for this resource, and there are options like do we want to keep the profiling signatures only, which means statistical detail about the data, minimum, maximum, or pattern of the data, suggested data types, percentage of nulls and things like that. Or you want to do signatures and values as well, which means you're not only ingesting the signature data or about the metadata, but also the values of the actual data values too. Please note that all of this data is encrypted and it is stored with a tenant specific key, so it is safe. But then if you are really not into storing certain values or certain resources into cloud, then you can just say keep signatures only. I'll keep signatures and values here for. And then we have profiling scope, incremental or full, sampling type. So based on the resource, we support certain sampling. So all rows, limited rows, or random percentage. Now, it is always, I mean, it's not recommended to go with all rows unless you know that, yeah, the data is not a lot and you are sized pretty well for profiling all the data. So always go with a sample. In this case, I'm going with 200 rows sample just for demo purpose. And here I'll choose the runtime environment again. So metadata extraction, I have chosen runtime environment, which is secure agent. Now for profiling, I will choose runtime environment again. And you can see that in in this section, yeah, we have CDGC CST chosen as well. Now there are some other details like the submission timeout and precision of string fields, maximum text qualifier, and the documentation has details on all those things. So yeah, you could leave them default or just update it if needed. Now that's data profiling pretty much. Now we will go to the data classification section, the third part of the configuration. And this is where we can specify that, okay, I'm scanning this system, but I want to also discover some sensitive data or data of interest on this system. So for this purpose, I have selected address data, which is a data entity, address line 1, which is the data element, credit card, email, full name, phone number, USA, city, USA driving license. And I can add more as well. The moment I click on plus, there are 257 data classifications which are already existing in this environment. And most of this data classifications are out of the box for our customers, which means this is imported, this is predefined imported into your environment. You can choose your own custom ones, create your custom ones, or you can reuse the one which are already there. So I could just select anyone. Let's say for this one, I'm expecting some Austrian data, or Austria passport, just for example. I can say that, okay, these two are also needed for me, and these two gets added here. So that's data classification. And then the relationship discovery. Well, so relationship discovery, as I mentioned, this is gonna discover similar data, similar columns within the same resource. So it would look at the data as well as the metadata and give you some insights about the joins. So if there is a system which you do not know much about, let's say a set of files received from a vendor or some other system which you do not know much about, like how it is related and all individual tables, like, then you can turn this one on and it will give you some insights about how these tables could be joined, what is the similarity across and all of that. We can adjust the threshold as well. So it uses, and this is the model which is something works behind the scene to get all that similarity calculations. Now, last but not the least in the configuration is the Glossary Association. So as I mentioned, Glossary Association allows the scanning process to auto tag the technical metadata with business terms and metrics. So it is of much value if you think from business perspective, because generally people create glossary terms, but they do not know where that data really exists. But through this association, if you automatically tag the technical columns with glossaries, it would be easy for somebody in business to just search for the glossary and see all the related columns within tables and files across all over. The glossary association and the threshold is manageable. We could uh, move it up or down. So the Glossary Association uses some algorithms behind the scene, like generally the glossary terms are very descriptive, but the column names are cryptic, like you won't have vowels in them. Maybe the words order are switched. So it takes care of all those, variances. Like it uses a bag of word technique to auto tag content, but like I said, it may not always be very accurate. So it's always recommended to review what we tagged or what we could not tag, and do some additional enrichment by a data steward or somebody. Now that is all five key stages of the configuration phase, which is where we are right now. The next one is the filters, and as I mentioned, filter is very important. If we do not specify, we would end up ingesting a lot of metadata, which would create bad experience for the users, which would be very uh, bad for performance. It could take forever if I turn on profiling and all these settings, and then I go to a database and without any filter, just bring in 5,000 tables. So it's important to use filters, and for filter condition, we have include metadata, and you can add multiple condition like go for a specific schema, and you can say exclude metadata and then go for certain tags like temp table, backup tables, or schema names with something in them. So that's how we could, use these combination of condition to bring relevant metadata. And after the first scan, you can just update your filter condition to bring more and more stuff. Now, to understand how to, use wildcards and these things, product documentation has those details. And here also we have some examples like schema name or hr.star will include all metadata from its HR schema. hr.im will include or exclude all metadata from the table starting with the name EMP employee maybe and work accordingly. So that's the filter and we should always select it. Now for the next tab, the associations, this is where we can assign stakeholders at the time of scanning. So I can select a stakeholder assignment and I have to select a role. So for that purpose, I have to have a role created in the administrator service for data governance services, and I can choose a specific role, for example, governance administrator in this case. And the moment I click select for users, it would pop up the list of all users in the Informatica Data Management Cloud, which we have onboarded through native or other SSO means. Now I can select one user and tag it to be the governance administrator. I can add more stakeholdership on this. So that associations and for schedule, uh, once you have created the resource, you can choose to run it on a specific schedule and choose the repeat frequency. Maybe for the first time, you want to just do a quick run like save and submit, and that's also possible. So, but with that, we could just submit the resource, like do a quick save and submit the resource and submit the job. Once you save it, then the run option will appear for you. So like for this example, I'm just not going to save any changes, but I'll just quickly go and show the run option real quick for you. So you can see here that the moment I have it saved, the run option is here. And when you click on run, one good thing to note here is that in Cloud Data Governance and Catalog, you can choose which part to run. So maybe in the first run, you did metadata extraction and data profiling. But since they are different operations now, every time you want to do some data classification discovery, let's say you want to discover a new data classification, SSN or email or phone number on an already existing resource, and you don't want to go through the entire process of metadata extraction and data profiling, well, you can select these things to be not running, and you could just say that, okay, only do data classification, relationship discovery, and glossary association. For this example, let's say I decided that I have created some new glossary terms and I have got some new data classifications. I know the source data may not have changed so much, so I want to just run the classification and glossary association. And since the discovery runs on Informatica serverless cluster, so this means that on secure region, practically nothing would run there at all. And all of this will happen on Informatica side, will scale according to the volume. And you don't have to worry about opening a new connection to a database or an application which may already be overloaded with users. So the moment you click on run, well, it submits a job and you would see that, okay, this job has been submitted. You can go to the monitor and pick up that run instance. For this example, I have already picked up, one such instance. So this job I have run a while ago. But when you go to the monitor, you can see all these different steps, which got executed when the job was run. So metadata extraction happened, data profiling happened, and all these sub stages too, like test connection, source extraction, content transfer, and profiling, data classification. And at any point, you can download these logs too, or you can visualize these logs here as well. So the logs are pretty intuitive. I mean, would see a CSV sort of extract from the logs, and you can see individual record saying what worked, what failed, what got discovered, things like that. So all of this, is something we need to do in order to execute or extract metadata from a system, source system to catalog. Now with this, the execution part is completed. Another thing I wanted to show is that how you can purge a resource. So we talked about scanning metadata, but here if you see, uh, if you go to the explore view again and go to this resource, in the three dots here, you can see that there are some other options too. You can edit, of course, and you can run from this view itself. You can delete the resource or purge the metadata, and you can also set permissions. Well, this permissions allows you to select what users can actually, uh, users or user groups can actually modify this resource. So this is also something to keep note of, that you can add a role and then allow them to only make changes to this resource and not everybody else. And it would be pretty common that, maybe a specific resource belongs to a certain group of people and they want that, okay, only they should make changes to that. Nobody else should modify it. So this is how we can do it. We can say TDGC, maybe governance administrator, and I can select user or user groups. But I'm just gonna cancel this, but I just wanted to show this option too. So this one always explore how you can purge, delete, set permissions, or edit or run from the explore UI here. Now that closes the extraction part of metadata. We went through all different stages. I quickly wanted to show the data classifications as well. So we have got data classifications here. And if I go to the explore and, instead of catalog sources, now I selected data classifications. And these 257 data classifications is what I have already existing. And this is how you can import the predefined content. When you click on import predefined content, Secure Agent will make a connection to Informatica Cloud repository and bring any new data domain, data classifications created. So this means like it's pretty seamless and you will always be in sync with what we are creating on our end. Now for this example, I wanted to show a data element and data entity. So let's first look at the data element. So address line 1 is one example, and let me create a copy so that I can show it in editable mode. So this is an address line 1 data element, and it classifies the column metadata and data values uh, uh, for address line 1. And here you can see that, okay, there are attributes, operators, lookup tables, constants, all these different options are there. And I have got, this is my rule over here. So I'm looking for metadata condition 2, looking for the name, address appearance in the column name. And I'm also looking for the data fields as well, like the data in those in that table too. So I'm looking for some values within frequent values, and this here is basically a constant. So to keep the rules easy, we can always use constants uh, to like specify in our condition. So in this case, there is a C1 constant, and let's just take a look what C1 constant is. So if I go to the constants instead of attribute, I can see this is C1. And if I click on edit, I can see that C1 is nothing but, like different variations of address line 1, like avenue, lane, and different ways, like uh, park, river, suite. So all these things. So when you have to specify too many values, there are options that you can use a dictionary, or you can look up like the lookup table or constant. But through these combinations, you can create your rules and apply the rules on both data, metadata, parent name like table name, or comments in the column, parents comments in the table name. And I would encourage you to go through the product documentation as well and look at some sample data domains, which are the sample data elements which are created there. But this data element is basically pre-created for you, so you can use it or you can create your own as well based on the documentation. So now that's the data element. Now let's quickly jump on the another topic I wanted to show is data entity. So if I go to data entity, the address data, which is a data entity. Now data entity is a combination of data classification. So I can choose data classification and put them together to define. So address data basically is a data entity that classifies for address information. It's an entity and it includes any three of these five data domains. So this takes us to and for the demo, for this metadata command center perspective. As I mentioned, it's always recommended to go to the data governance and catalog service as well and look at the results which is ingested. So this is the data governance and catalog UI. And if I go here, I think I'm running out of time, but I'll quickly maybe try to show this. This Google BigQuery customer order data is already ingested. I've got 100 columns, one database, one schema, 5 tables, and I can maybe open one of these tables and also show that what exists in those. So this is the result of our scanning process, by the way. So let's say if I open the state here, right? The state is a column in a table uh, in Google BigQuery, and it has already accepted two glossaries. One is state, and another one is a security tags, which doesn't look right. So I can say it's not the right association. I could curate it and delete it, and it will move from accepted to rejected. So this is and I did not have the state data domain tagged, so that's why the data element classification is not done. But I can always click here and select that, okay, I know this is state, so tag it with state, and it's USA state name, let's say. So this is the curation which data stewards can do. And then we can look at the profiling results too, like the profiling is completed. This is the pattern. Mostly it's a 2-character thing, so it looks like a state code to me. This is and these are the value frequency. I mean, since we have ingested value frequency, so I can see California, New York, some nulls are there too, and Oregon, Massachusetts. So this is actually the content which is ingested in the catalog. So I didn't want to go much in detail on the data governance and catalog. Probably we will do another webinar for that. But I just wanted to show how you can quickly validate the results in the data governance and catalog UI as well. So with that, this concludes the demo, and I think we can get to the Q&A part as well. So thank you for listening. Thanks a lot.
Hi all, we have reached the Q&A part. Please post your questions and any unanswered queries will be responded offline through email.
Sure. Thanks, Harshita. I'll take a few questions which have just popped up on the screen. Meanwhile, so one question from Mahesh is from Liberty Mutual is, I want to know if we can extract the resource after scan in CSV or Excel format. So the export process where you can like go to the UI and take the export of metadata from the catalog, that feature is not there yet, but I think it is tracked for the next release itself. I mean, so most likely Feb or March is when it will be announced, but this is so I would recommend that just stay tuned for the product release announcement. So it's gonna happen real soon on this one, so, but it's not there today. Yeah. Another question is data lineage part of the CDGC platform? If not, which module? Well, data lineage is part of CDGC platform. For demo purpose, I have picked up a resource which is metadata with tables and columns and all of that. But yeah, you can scan certain data lineage resources too. Like if you're using Informatica Cloud for your data pipelines, you can scan it. You can scan Power Center, and we are adding more and more resources. And the thing you can do is custom lineage is also available in Cloud Data Governance, just as it used to be in our on-prem solution. So one thing to note is that you will need to do the connection assignment after you run the lineage-based resource so that the lineage can be rendered. But yeah, we can show the lineage, and if you look at the webinar from the previous week or some other webinars which have been done on cloud data governance, we have shown the lineage in the catalog, and it's pretty powerful. There are a lot of business overlays possible on lineage too. So this new question on from Sunil from University of Texas says that can we use API calls in the cloud from the catalog? Not at this moment. It's gonna come soon. But yeah, as of now, we don't have public exposed APIs in Cloud Data Catalog today. Okay, somebody just posted a question. I don't see any name, but the question is JDBC scanner supported? So the JDBC, it's from Sunil. Maybe there was some lag in the screen. So Sunil has posted this question from University of Texas that if JDBC scanners are supported, we do have a dedicated scanner for JDBC type. And the support statement varies based on which JDBC driver it is. So if in the reference section of the slides today, I have put links to a lot of useful information. One of such links will show you supported catalog sources. And within JDBC, you can see that there are certain JDBC systems which are certified, like our QA team has validated them in-house, but there are like a lot of databases out there, so testing all of them is not possible. So that's why the support statement varies, but the experience is that JDBC driver, JDBC scanner works to get the metadata. It's the support which may vary, and you should see the documentation. So it does, we do support JDBC. Any other questions? I think this one is answered. You can mark it answered. All right. If no other question, then I think thank you for joining in huge attendance today and for all your questions. Any questions or further comments, please reach out through the channel. And thank you for your time today. Handing over to you, Harshita.
Thank you, Avanish, for such wonderful presentation. And Puneet and Srini, thank you for taking up the questions. We kindly request our audience to take up the survey and let us know your thoughts. Today's webinar will be available tomorrow on the portal under the resources tab. With that, we will end today's webinar. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.